There are aches that don't come from heartbreak, but from the quiet echo of once being deeply seen. You don't miss their body. You don't miss the daily presence. What you miss is something harder to name, the sacred moment when your soul felt understood without needing to explain itself. That brief instant when your silence wasn't awkward, but sacred, when your wounds weren't judged, but gently recognized. Carl Jung called this kind of meeting numinous, an experience that touches the divine within the psyche, a recognition so deep it awakens what was sleeping in the soul. Neville Goddard taught that your consciousness isn't shaped by people, but by states of being. You weren't addicted to a person, you were in resonance with the feeling of finally being emotionally real. This is not a video about them. This is a return to the place inside you that they briefly lit up. Because what you miss is not a relationship, it's the sanctuary of being emotionally decoded. And maybe now, it's time to rebuild that sacred space inside you. You thought it was about love, but love wasn't what shattered, it was recognition. There was a moment when you didn't need to explain why you feared silence or why certain songs made you cry. Someone simply knew, not in words, but in presence, in breath, in that sacred gaze that said, "I see the storm you carry, and I'm not afraid." And then it ended, not with betrayal, not with cruelty, but with something far more invisible, the quiet death of being understood. Now you walk through familiar rooms, say familiar words, but something in you stays hidden, as if the one who could read between your sighs has left and taken your translation with them. It's not rejection that hurts, it's the collapse of your language. Carl Jung said that the greatest suffering is to be alienated from oneself. And that's what this loss did. It didn't just remove a person, it removed the reflection in which your soul finally recognized its own face. You're not unloved, but you feel unread. You smile, but it echoes nowhere. You speak, but the words fall like leaves that no longer reach the ground of another's understanding. And so, the shadow grows, not from solitude, but from the silence of not being met. They tell you, let go, release, move on. But what if what you're holding isn't the person, but the sacred state they once awakened in you? It wasn't their eyes or voice you were addicted to. It was the feeling of being emotionally decoded, of being met in a place even you had long forgotten existed. Neville Goddard spoke of states of consciousness, how it's never the form we're attached to, but the internal state that form once made possible. You weren't clinging to a body. You were clinging to the moment when your soul felt seen without defense. And now, being told to let go feels like being asked to forget how to speak your own language. But here lies the deeper invitation. The form may have passed, but the state, that moment of divine intimacy, of internal homecoming, it still exists within you. The person was the mirror, not the source. You are not being called to erase what you felt. You are being called to carry it yourself, to become the sanctuary you once found in someone else. Carl Jung might say, you are now meeting your own archetype of the witness, the part of you that doesn't need external validation to feel real, only presence. So perhaps letting go doesn't mean forgetting. Perhaps it means remembering, in a way that liberates rather than binds. Perhaps they didn't come into your life to stay. Perhaps they came to speak what your soul had been trying to whisper for years. They were never your forever, but they were the first to translate your silence. In their presence, your depth finally had words. Not because they gave it to you, but because they mirrored what was already waiting to be seen. They didn't invent your complexity, they revealed it. And now, their absence isn't a longing for return, it's a hunger to re-access the part of you they illuminated. This is the heartbreak that has no closure. Not because love failed, but because meaning was born and then left unspoken. Jung would say, the soul doesn't seek permanence, it seeks integration. The ones who awaken us are often not the ones who walk beside us. They appear as sacred fragments, catalyzing the inner narrative, then vanishing like a dream that leaves the bed still warm. You don't miss them. You miss the you that existed when they looked at you. The way your voice softened, your truth surfaced, your pain felt holy. And now the soul wanders, not searching for another, but for the forgotten reflection they once held. That isn't a loss. That is a calling. After being seen so deeply and then left, something fragile within you fractured. It wasn't just the end of a connection, it was the quiet birth of mistrust, not toward them, but toward the very experience of being understood. Now, when someone gets close, your heart contracts. A compliment makes you question the motive. A lingering gaze feels like a trap. You don't fear love, you fear recognition, because the last time someone saw you, they didn't stay, and now the soul flinches at the very thing it used to crave. Neville Goddard spoke of the outer world as a mirror of the inner assumption. If being seen equals loss, then every time you are touched by tenderness, your unconscious prepares for exile. You begin to protect yourself from intimacy with small silences. You avoid vulnerability by pretending you're fine. You shrink in conversations, not because you have nothing to say, but because your truth once cost you everything. Carl Jung reminds us, what we fear in others is often what we have not yet reconciled within. It's not just people you mistrust, it's the memory of your own openness, that moment when you were finally heard, and then, quietly, abandoned. So now, safety becomes distance, and closeness becomes a wound. But underneath the armor, a part of you still remembers, still aches, still hopes. There is a place within the psyche, silent, ancient, and sacred, where the need to be witnessed is born. In Jungian psychology, this is the archetype of the witness. It is not a person, it is a presence, a gaze that does not seek to fix or analyze, but to stay, to remain when the tears come, to remain when the joy feels too fragile, to remain when the soul trembles under the weight of being known. When you met that person, the one who stayed just long enough to look into your depth without blinking, it felt like coming home, not to them, but to yourself. Their presence was a mirror, yes, but more than that, it was a door, a portal into the part of you that had never been held in such quiet safety. In their company, your soul remembered a version of itself it had forgotten. Their words were not answers, they were invitations. Their silence was not absence, it was listening. And when they left, it wasn't just a departure, it was an exile, not from their arms, but from the sacred place inside you that only opened in their presence. That home is not lost. It was never theirs to begin with. They simply had the key, but the house was always yours. There's a reason you still listen to the voice messages, still read the old letters, still remember every pause in those late-night conversations. You're not trying to bring them back. You're trying to bring back the version of you that existed when you were finally heard. It wasn't their words that saved you. It was how your voice sounded in their presence. Clear, raw, undiluted. You remember those moments not because of them, but because of what they awakened in you. When you return to those memories, it's not nostalgia. It's longing for self-presence, for the echo of your own soul reverberating in the space they once held open. Neville Goddard taught that our consciousness carries impressions like seeds, and some people are not meant to stay, but to activate those sacred states within us. You're not listening to the past. You're listening for yourself, for the woman you were in that moment, the one who spoke without defense, who revealed her pain without apology, who felt real. And now your soul keeps pressing replay, not to cling, but to remember, to recover the tone of your own truth. You're not obsessed. You're trying to find yourself again. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. She never spoke of her childhood shame, not to friends, not to family, not even to herself, until him. In a moment of trembling courage, she let it out, the words she'd buried, the silences that had shaped her, and he didn't flinch. He listened. He stayed, for a while. Then, one day, without reason or warning, he was gone, and with him, the mirror vanished. The place where her truth had finally been safe collapsed into silence. She didn't cry out loud. She simply stopped speaking, existentially, as if every conversation felt hollow after that one sacred exchange. Months passed, seasons blurred, and then one morning, she did something small, but holy. She wrote it all down, not for him, not for closure, but for the version of herself who still deserved to be heard. Every word she had once offered to his presence, she now gave to herself, not as a diary, as a ritual. She was no longer waiting to be understood. She was becoming her own translator. Carl Jung would call this individuation, the moment when the unconscious no longer seeks an external mirror, but steps forward into self-recognition. What he once held, she now carried. And in doing so, she didn't erase the pain. She transfigured it. There comes a time when the soul stops waiting to be understood and begins to understand itself. You no longer need another to validate the depth you carry. You begin to realize what you once received was not a gift given by another. It was a part of you that awakened in their gaze. And now that gaze becomes inward, to sit with your truth, even when it trembles, to read your own words as scripture, not for their beauty but for their honesty. Carl Jung called this individuation, the sacred process where the unconscious no longer depends on reflection, but rises into consciousness, carrying its symbols, its pain, its power. And Neville Goddard reminds us, the state you assume becomes your lived world. When you walk as if already understood, you begin to live as one who no longer needs translation. Understanding is not a luxury, it is a spiritual practice, and when practiced with devotion, it becomes the home your soul has always longed for. You are not alone. You are becoming your own witness. What aches in you is not the memory of a person. It is the sacred echo of once feeling profoundly known. It hurts not because something ended, but because something eternal was momentarily touched. This wasn't ordinary love. It was the emotional miracle of being mirrored without needing to explain. The wound feels deep because it wasn't only personal, it was ancestral. A longing carried through lifetimes to be seen, heard, and held in your full truth. But that experience wasn't given to you. It was awakened in you. Neville Goddard would say, your inner state constructs your outer world. What you felt in their presence was never about them. It was your soul remembering its own wholeness. And Jung reminds us, all healing is integration. They may have left, but the part of you they revealed is still here, still breathing, still waiting to be understood, this time not by another, but by the only witness who will never leave, you. So perhaps this is not the end of the connection. Perhaps it's the beginning of your own recognition. And if your heart stirred while listening, if something deep within you whispered, I remember that feeling, then you are not alone. You are waking up. If you made it this far, comment below, Estoy despierta. Your soul will recognize others who write the same.